Good evening and welcome to our last family workshop with Dr. Collier. We're so incredibly excited to have you with us and discuss the topic of the brain and behavior modification. Again, thank you all so much. Barb Campbell, Director of Family Engagement. If you missed any of the workshops, they're all recorded for you with Spanish subtitles. So we'll be sure that you have access and your friends do as well to all the topics we have covered. So with that, Dr. Collier, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Fantastic. Hello again. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my presentation here. This one is a really fun one for me to do, called behavior modification, otherwise known as BMOD. I don't get to do this one as often, although I wish that I could. I think you'll understand as I go through it. And so if you have wondered how to control a teenager's behavior who's acting out, to get kids motivated to do certain things, then this presentation is really good for you. But I want to, of course, start by talking a little bit about really the whole point to me of shaping a child's behavior is so they can grow long strings of neurons in their frontal lobe for executive functioning skills that are required for self-efficacy, for motivation, for getting things done, meeting deadlines, self-control, having empathy for other people. And so a lot of times we don't realize that this entire growth process is based upon the use it or lose it principle. That basically says if your children are using certain neurons, then they're going to grow long networks for those particular skills. These are the skills that I really want parents to memorize and turn into brain-based praise. So being able to say, instead of nice job, good work, ooh, I like how you did that without even me asking you to do it. Wow, tell me how you solved that problem. Instead of, oh, you're so smart, I'd love for you to replace that with something like, that was really great judgment. Tell me what you were thinking. Wow, I really like how you organized that project. Tell me what your brain was going through when you were thinking about that. Remember that performance-based praise can increase anxiety, and intelligence-based praise can also lead kids down the wrong path of thinking that they are so smart that once they get to something that might be difficult, they blame their lack of doing well on being not so smart instead of effort. What we want to do is kind of land in the middle and use brain-based praise to increase executive functioning skills. And this is really in line with what we're talking about tonight with using positive reinforcement and rewards to increase skills. A lot of times people will ask me things like, you know, is my kid crazy? I can't believe they engaged in this behavior. Since I work with a lot of kids who have engaged in a lot of high-risk behavior, a lot of times what I explain to parents is, oh, absolutely not. I can completely understand why your kid did this. It's very important to remember that it's not that you're not teaching them morals and values. Kids have morals and values, but they don't make decisions based upon those moral values until they get much older. When we're younger, we get away with engaging in riskier behavior just if we think we're going to avoid punishment because we want to do it out of our own self-interest. As we grow older, we start wanting to please other people, be a good girl or a good boy. And then when we get around high school, we make sure that we follow the rules and limits because we don't want to get in trouble with the law. Although if we can still get away with it, we probably will engage in it. It's not until we're around 18, 19, 20, 21 that we actually start making higher level moral decisions based upon a social contract, which means it's mutual. I'll be nice to you if you're nice to me. We create a social contract together that we both treat each other with kindness and respect, or maybe our kid just decides to do it because it's the right thing to do. We can't count on kids to make these types of decisions until their brain is really grown and evolved to that point. So what do we do in the meantime? We shape their behavior and have patience for when they make a decisional balance decision. And so I'll give you a story of a kiddo that I worked with a few years ago. His parents brought him in because he had a party while they were out of town. I asked him to take me through the decision, because this is a kid who grew up with really good morals, good values, but still engaged in risky behavior. And he said to me that he really wanted his parents to trust him. He was 15 years old, and he knew this was a really big opportunity to be home for 2 weeks alone while his parents were in Europe. But then he found out that there was a really cute girl who wanted to come over and spend some time with him because she knew his parents were out of town. Then his best friend said, oh, I scored some marijuana. We got to try this. And then he also said, I'll throw in some alcohol. And the decisional balance tipped into the favor of him having a party, when it actually had started really with good intentions, good morals, good values. But his brain did not have the kind of self-control that it needed to fight all of these social pressures. And of course, he thought he could get away with it. So a couple of things that we can do. We can create a family code, which is our baseline. In our family, we treat others with kindness, compassion, and respect. We don't do drugs ever, and we only drink when we're 21 or over. When we have a family code, it consists of a few simple rules that we repeat often and that everybody is held accountable to. The greatest way to do this is to sit down as a family and really do a family code activity where you write out what your values and morals are as a family, a few of the risky behaviors that you want to make sure your kids avoid, and get the enlistment of your kiddos in this. Once you have a family code, then you can repeat it often. And as your child grows into a teenager, you have that as a foundational base, but then you also switch to understanding what your role is as the parent of a teenager. This is really critical because as our children go through this second phase of neurodevelopment, what we see is a lot of aggression, a lot of novelty seeking, a lot of moodiness and sulking. And here's what's basically happening. The fight or flight part of the brain deep inside, known as the limbic system, is fully mature by the time we are 11, 12. Two little organelles are important to remember. One is the amygdala. That is the switch that turns the emotional fight or flight part of the brain on. The amygdala fully mature by 11, 12. Now, scientists believe that this really comes online at a really important time in our kids' neurodevelopment because they're supposed to push away from us, although that's painful. They're supposed to push away from us and really rebel against a lot of the family ideals because they're supposed to go out into the world and create their own. What impels them forward to do that is that another organelle, our nucleus accumbens, also matures by age 11, 12. This is the part of the brain that makes all that dopamine, that is the neurotransmitter that makes us feel calm and happy when we do new things or when we do things that are good for our survival. And because this comes online, we see an increase in novelty seeking. So we've got this intense desire to go out into the world and try on a little bit of everything to figure out who we are. We push away from our parent, our family unit, in order to make this happen. All normal, natural signs of healthy neurodevelopment, although very scary and sometimes quite nerve-wracking for parents. All right, so you've got your family code, you understand brain development. Now let's talk about your next tool, which is shaping human behavior. Now, I learned this from a class that I took in undergrad called Operant Behavior Principles, which hopefully you can see in this slide. And it was a theory, or is a theory, that was posited by this gentleman right here in the white lab coat. this is B.F. Skinner. Some of you guys who may have taken Psych 101 may remember B.F. Skinner because he is what has been termed the father of modern behaviorism. He coined the term positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and punishment. And he taught people about these principles by creating this box here, which is called a Skinner box in his name. And he trained animals, a lot of chickens and mice and yes, rats. And so what you see in this Skinner box is a receptacle here that is full of sugar pellets. And so the mouse is, or actually the rat in this case, is pushing a bar in order to earn one of these sugar pellets. And so what I want to do is teach you guys about my experience learning operant behavioral principles so that you can really understand the idea of shaping human and animal behavior. So I took operant behavioral principles lab, and basically I came to the school for 2 to 3 hours every single day for one spring semester, and I had a little white rat assigned to me and I named her Anna, and this is exactly what she looked like. Really pretty much all white rats look alike, so I chose any picture, but I got Anna assigned to me. And I would go and I'd get her out of her cage and I'd have to watch out for her teeth because she was literally on half rations, so she would work pretty hard. I would place her into my assigned Skinner box, which looked like this. There's the bar. Here's a receptacle for water. And of course, here's the receptacle where the sugar pellets come out of. And these things that are on the bottom are electrodes for punishing, which we actually never did. And I'll tell you why in just a minute. I actually put my hand on this one day without her in the cage just to see what it felt like. And it was very uncomfortable. So this is what a Skinner box looks like on the inside. Here it is from the outside, and this was my syllabus for the class. So my professor said, okay, you have to teach your rat how to press the bar 50 times, put her nose on a dot, and place her head through a trapeze, all for one sugar pellet. And I was like, oh my God, how am I going to be able to do this? It seemed rather daunting. How do you get a rat to work for you? Well, what kind of motivation do you need? Well, for Anna, sugar pellets was quite enough. They also had her only on half rations, so she only ate half of what she normally would in a given day. So when I went and picked her up, she was quite motivated to work. But how do you motivate teenagers or children? Well, you look around and you find out literally what motivates them. This is critical because a lot of parents will think that things will motivate them, but they won't. For instance, I had a parent tell his child that he would buy him a whole brand new set of rims on his new truck if he stayed sober for 6 months. Well, what he failed to understand is that his kid really did want those rims for his truck, but his kid wanted to drink and use drugs and alcohol more. So the decisional balance there was out of sync. Now, what we ended up working with that child on were things like privacy and privileges to go to the school that he wanted to go to, and allowance, things that he would really work hard for in the here and now. So what I want you guys to do is I want you to make a list of the things your teenager or your child will work for. Some kids will work for cell phones. Some kids don't have a cell phone or they don't care about it. Some kids will work for extra time with you. They will work for money, for an allowance. They will work for a screen time, different computer activities. But remember that your kids will also work pretty hard for your praise. It's important that parents remember this because when our kids turn into an angry, argumentative teenager, sometimes we don't think that our praise is really making a difference, and we actually reduce the amount of praise that we offer, which is a big mistake. Because even though teenagers won't tell you about it, or maybe they will, it shows in their mood and motivation. We really have to keep praising. Now, shaping is an operant behavioral principle, which is defined by the systematic reinforcement of behavioral responses. And this is the key word, systematic. You systematically reward the behaviors that you want to see in order to get someone to the behavior that you ultimately want them to end with. And so a little humor, a little operant behavioral humor. We've got a teenage rat here, which I think is hilarious because they've got like an earring in, which is actually their identification tag. But we've got the scientist parent rat up here who says, "What's wrong with you? Nothing motivates you, not pellets